It's just another wrong track. And some people thinking that they can fake this, but I can drop it at a higher level. Cause I'm inclined to stoop down, and I'm so deep down.
Right, we're away. This is exciting. We're talking about the 6 years or the 5th years won that little thing.
I think definitely 6 years won it.
I think the 5th years.
I think the 5th years are kidding themselves.
Anyway, so this is welcome to our number one. This is video number one of Higher RMPS, and we're going to talk to you today about the life of the Buddha. And this is going to help you in your studies. If you don't want to read this anymore, then as Spriggs and I thought it'd be a good idea to filter it. Do you want to start off with the special birth and I'll get the phone?
Okay, so when you think about the special birth, you have to think about the key things that were special about it, things that stood out, that were different, and not only the facts about why, what those things were, but what they tried to communicate, why they were different. So you can't just say there was a baby elephant, you have to explain it properly, how his mother had a vision of a baby elephant entering her womb, and how that meant that the birth was going to be a special birth. You have to link up the special event with, and then go on and say why it was special, what it meant. And that would be a good example of one. I'm trying to give all the things in special birth.
Have you got the dream, about the elephant dream?
I got the elephant dream.
And the... what's after the elephant dream? Oh, then the prediction about his birth?
So there was a prediction. An astrologer
Asita
came along, and he predicted he would either be one of two things. He would either be a holy man, or he would become a great ruler.
So his dad, have you got to the dad bit?
You go with the dad.
Okay, so his dad didn't want him to be a holy man because he wanted obviously to keep on his kingdom. So his dad decided that he wanted him to be a king, like him, which kind of brings us on to the life of luxury, because shortly after his mother passed away, maybe partly because of that reason too, King Suddhodana gave Siddhartha everything he wanted. So what would the modern example of that be? Like modern monarchy, or?
Like a life with all the trappings of luxury. So everything, not only
iPads.
Nice clothes.
Nice clothes.
But he could also, he could do whatever he wanted, so he didn't only have material possessions, but he was a great athlete, he was successful in what he did as well. And he had, in terms of his relationships, he had a relationship that should have made him happy. He had a wife and he had a child. But he still wasn't happy underneath it all.
So do you know that way sometimes you're at a party and you should be happy because everybody's there for you at a party, but there's like a little bit of you that's kind of a little bit, do you know what I mean? Have you ever heard that?
Yeah, when I used to party.
Let's go! Party rockets in the house tonight. Everybody just have a good time.
Yeah.
No, I mean like a birthday party, you know, I mean that kind of party.
Oh,
I don't mean like partying. Though he was just partying, Siddhartha, he was just partying, he had no care in the world, and because his dad had sheltered him completely, had no concept of any suffering or any death or any pain. Until one day he went out and with Channa, his charioteer, and they saw the four sights. Which totally shook him up. So that was old age and sickness and death were the main things that he saw. But he also saw a holy man, and it's said that the holy man was dealing with this dead body, and in those days, ancient India, they would have burned the bodies in a pyre.
So right now we are in the major place of Hindu people, which is known as Pashupatinath, where you see lots of live cremation, 24 hours. We perform the ceremony here, and right now there are 3 dead bodies are burning, and one is about to be burned. The family member bring the body from ambulance. Then the first thing that they do is they carry the body in the bamboo ladder and they purify the body in the water. After that, we cover the body with 3 major clothes, which is white, orange and red, in which white is the color of mourning and purity, whereas red is the color of happiness, wedding and color of God. And orange and yellow is considered to be holy color. Yeah. So those color we see in the funeral. When a man dies, his first son will give the fire, and if in case the wife die, then the youngest son light the first flame of the fire that is start from the mouth. And to burn the body, we don't use petrol or diesel or kerosene. We use the things which is related to cow, because cow is holy animal. So we use the food which is eaten by the cow, example straw. Yeah, we use for melting the bone into ashes, because the straw, when it burns, it have a lot of heat inside, and butter, which is from the cow, and also sugar, which is from the nature. So we use natural things most over for burning the body. Depending upon the structure of the body, but in general, there is like 3 to 4 hours it will take from procedures to the end of the ceremony. So Hindu people cremate the body because of this 5 element too, in which air, water, fire, earth and sky is the things that we are using in our lifetime. Reincarnation is just a faith of all the Hindu people. What they believe is when we die, we have to be reincarnated, because body die, soul does not die. If we do good karma leads us to heaven. If we do bad karma leads us to hell.
So that's literally what he saw. He saw this body that, being burned and turned into ash, and that freaked him right out.
Mm-hmm. And it wasn't only that he became aware that these things existed, he became aware that they existed for him, that he wasn't immune to old age and sickness and death, that those things would affect him.
And his father and his son and his wife. So some people argue that when he chose to leave the palace, which he did shortly after the foresights, that he was being selfish. But Buddhists would say that in actual fact, no, he was trying to find an answer to this suffering, this existence, this cycle of, they believe in rebirth, so it was constantly being born, dying, getting old, or suffering, then dying, then being reborn again, just to do it again and again. So some people reckon that actually he was being unselfish.
Mm-hmm. And all the truths that he eventually came to understand of the impermanence of everything and the impermanence of himself, he was starting his understanding of them at this point.
Yeah. So then he left the palace, and his wife and kid. Bit dodgy, sounds like something EastEnders, doesn't it? Right, but anyway, and he became an ascetic, and to symbolise that, he got his hair and he cut it off. In those days, it was very difficult to keep your hair clean, so it was a mark of wealth if you had hair that was clean. And often in those days in India, they would also have lots of jewellery and gold in their hairs to adorn themselves to show how wealthy they were. That's actually why, if you become a Buddhist, a piece of your hair is cut off to symbolise this rejection of luxury and attachment to self and that kind of thing.
And he also gave up his fine clothes, that was an extension of that, and he physically left his sheltered life in the palace, and he rejected all of that to the extent that he became a homeless wanderer in search of truth.
And to find an answer to suffering. So what ascetics did, and they still do this in India today, is that they put their body and mind through suffering to try and master it and to try and conquer it. So that's what Siddhartha tried to do. He was actually very good at it. The stories say that Matt, almost starving himself very, very close to death. It said that he could take his finger and touch his spine, like proper Ming and stuff. And and it was said that he would eat a grain of rice a day, or like bird droppings. He would eat that. If he wanted to drink, he would just need to wait till it rains. He didn't bathe. It was pretty brutal.
I push my fingers into my eyes. It's the only thing that slowly stops the ache. But it's made of all the things I have to.
And if you Google right now, if you pause this video and you Google ascetics in India, you'll find loads of this stuff. But they still exist today. So people in India that are Hindu do not accept that Siddhartha found an answer to suffering. They reject that, many of them, and they are still trying to find an answer to suffering by putting their body through pain. So he did that for 6 years, was it?
But he didn't find an answer.
No.
In fact, he got to the point where he had tried it to the extreme, and he was offered some soup.
Right, it depends. Some people say it was rice, some people say it was soup. It's a bowl from it was from a peasant girl that was just rocking about in the farms. But yeah, she offered him some food. And then, just before that, he'd heard this musician going by in a passing boat, and the musician said to the person he was teaching, he said, "If the string's too tight, it'll snap." And if it's too slack, it will not play.
We should have props.
Yeah, we should have props. We should get a guitar. We'll cut and edit, and then we'll an overlay of guitars and stuff. Remember that next time. And so that the analogy was of his body. So his body was like this guitar, and as in his life of luxury, he wasn't doing anything. He was just being there. Whereas in his life of a strict asceticism, it was so tight, he nearly died, and that was no good either. And that's called the middle way, the idea between all opposite extremes. That's what Buddhists tried to practice today. sleep on rocks, but they don't sleep in a bed with 10 cushions. Buddhists don't go out for 5-star meals, but they don't eat nothing. You know, it's like it's the opposite of all extremes. That's what the middle way is all about. Until they got enlightened. I think I'll pass over to you for this one. That's the
So, in his search for enlightenment, he chose, like physically, he chose the middle way. So he chose to sit under a tree, and to not leave that spot until he had come to an understanding of how to avoid suffering. So he sat and he focused his mind, and it wasn't easy. He came across temptations. But he pressed on through them. Yeah, and
the temptations were Mara, and Buddhists believe that Mara is actually your mind, your selfishness. So these temptations that he had were actually his mind trying to lure him away from finding the truth about reality and the truth about suffering. And he was also, when that didn't work, his mind tried to scare him away from finding out the truth. This is all totally psychological. This is the difference between Buddhism and many other world religions, that the evil is not external. The evil, if you like, is actually in you. It's kind of in your head, which I think is quite interesting about it. It's totally psychological. So then Mara tried to scare him away. That didn't work either, because he'd found this middle way, and he'd start to realise that there's no such thing as a self. And eventually it said that he confronted his mind. And he saw the true nature of what reality is. Think of it like a bottle of water that's got like dirt in it. If your mind's constantly thinking about things like temptations and being scared, it's like it's constantly dirty and it's constantly like cloudy. Meditation for Buddhists is when you put your mind down, like on a table, and you let your thoughts settle. And then once you've done that, you can start clearing out all the dirt. And these are your illusions about self, and your illusions about what you think makes you happy. And your temptations and your desires and things you're scared of. That's the best analogy I've heard for what. It's very hard to say what enlightenment is, because it's something that cannot be described, it can only be experienced. It's like trying to explain land to a fish, or trying to explain colour to a blind person. You know, it's very, very difficult to
put into words, because it is beyond words.
You know, when you're young, enlightenment seems like it's just over that one little step. But truly, first of all, it makes enlightenment a thing which is already a mistake. So it's always going to be over that next step, because you have an idea about what it is, and you're chasing after what you think it is. But you know, there's a phrase, enlightenment is not what you think. And you can use that, you can turn that in a lot of different ways. But it's not what you think. So you can't conceptualize it. It's alive. It's way bigger. That's what this is about. You can't say it. If you say it, you've made it into a thing, and it's not it.
Buddhists have tried to explain it. They've talked about it in a negative way as unbecoming. It's this idea that if everything is constantly changing and you're constantly becoming, once you reach enlightenment, that ceases. But they've also tried to communicate it in more positive ways, like a destination. They call it the island, or the shelter.
Or like as cool water that relieves a fever, or a medicine that gets rid of a disease.
In Buddhism, we speak of nirvana, which is the cessation of all suffering. Nirvana, first of all, it means the cessation, the extinction of all suffering. But our suffering come from our wrong perceptions, avidya, misunderstanding. And that is why the practice of meditation, the practice of looking deeply, has the purpose of removing wrong perceptions from us. If we are able to remove our wrong perceptions, we will be able to be free from the afflictions and the sufferings that always arise from wrong perceptions. You have wrong perception on yourself and on the other, and the other has wrong perception on themselves and on you, and that is the cause of fear, of violence, of hatred. That is why trying to remove wrong perceptions is the only way to peace. And that is why nirvana is, first of all, the removal of wrong perceptions.
But again, all of these things are for us only on the surface, because unless you experience it, you can never truly understand it.
So from that moment on, Buddhists believed that Siddhartha, when he became enlightened and he saw the nature of reality, he became Buddha. And the word Buddha means awakened one. And it's like Sir or Miss or Doctor or Professor. It's a title.
Mm-hmm.
It's a title that's given to someone, a Buddha. And Buddhists actually believe that another Buddha, the rebirth of Siddhartha's consciousness, will come in the future. Maybe in the next eon, or there's all these predictions about it. One of the cool things is that many traditions in Buddhism believe it will be a female that will be enlightened sitting in a chair. So you go, girls, there's good news for you, potentially. Then Buddha sat and he thought about, could he express what he's learned to other people? Mm-hmm. And he decided that he could. So then he initially went back to the people that had rejected him during his asceticism. Mm-hmm. Did we mention that?
No. Right,
so just to go back for a second, when he was an ascetic, he was really good at starving himself and stuff, so he had a group of followers.
Mm-hmm. Initially, he was set up as someone who was great at it. Yeah,
because he was going to be a great religious leader. The prediction was true there, in that sense as well. And then, when he found the middle way, all these people rejected him. So he was alone. They were like, what's he doing, eating and bathing and trying to make himself healthy again? So they were like, nah, he's lost it. Again, which is why many Hindus reject Buddhism. So he went back to those people and then started teaching him the Four Noble Truths. That's all life is suffering. Suffering is caused by craving. That suffering can end, and you do that by following the middle way or the Eightfold Path, as it became later on.
This all called the Sermon at the Deer Park, his first big sermon.
And that's how Buddhism started, and the Dhamma is the word for the teachings or the truth or the way Buddha, the path to enlightenment. That's how that started to get taught to people. And the first people, the community that accepted this, not everybody accepted it, but the people that did accept it became the Sangha. Yeah. And the Sangha and the Buddha travelled together and taught till he was 80, till he died.
And that's still the name we give to the community of Buddhists today. They're still known as the Sangha.
So when he did die, think of food poisoning, he was in a lot of pain. Remember, the Buddha was not a god, he was just a man, and that's really, really important. So write that down. And when he did die, the Sangha actually passed down the teachings orally for about 500 years, so we're not sure. There's a bit of an issue there in terms of how accurate they are.
But for Buddhists, that isn't really an issue, because one of his final teachings, "Be a light unto yourself," was about how it's up to you to find the truth. The Buddha is a great example, but he is not a god. He's not a divine figure in any way. So the fact that there might be a little bit of inaccuracy really isn't the point.
Yeah, and when the Buddha, if you think back to who Mara was, and the enlightenment moment, Mara is within you in terms of your mind, the way your mind works. So Buddhists believe that your Mara is going to be different to my Mara, and so ultimately it's completely, you're going to be faced with your own challenges in your mind, and there's nothing external to that. It's all about you coming to your own conclusion and your own path to figure out what makes ultimately you happy and stops your suffering.
Mm-hmm. So there is, in that sense, there is no set formula.
So I think that's pretty much it, isn't it? That was all. Phone again. It was all. Okay, after a minute.
Signing out. Team RMPS.
Watch your